program is on promotion, and our panel is Stan Burdick and Chuck Goodman with Osa Mathews moderating. We would like to have all of you participate in this program, but before we do, we want to sort of give you some of our ideas in what we've done in promotion. We're so happy that so many of you are interested in this, because we feel like that this is really the starting of our square dance program. Those that are really interested in promoting new dancers to learn how to dance. And there's a right way and a wrong way. There are successful ways, and of course, as many of you know, unsuccessful advertisement. And today we have on our panel two young men that have been in the business quite a long time, and they have learned through trial and error some of the things that are going to be very advantageous to us as advertising our new dance program. I'm going to introduce each of them, give you a little background on who they are, where they're from, what they do, but they're going to each give you some of their input. Then we're going to ask you folks to share with us some of the successful ideas that you have incorporated in advertising new classes. And we get all of these on a list, on a tape, and we can put them out. You know, when we were just beginning in the olden days, may I say that? When I was just beginning in the olden days, we had to learn by trial and error. The newer callers and the ones that are coming in now are going to have the advantage of having all these successful things listed for them that they can put to work in their areas. First of all, I would like to introduce Stan Burdick and give you a little background on Stan. Stan is from Huron, is it? But I call it Sandusky, Ohio. That's where your magazine's from. And he's thoroughly involved in the aspects of modern square dancing. He's a full-time professional caller who travels over 60,000 miles per year to call for clubs and festivals. He and his wife, Kathy, are editors and publishers of American Square Dance, a national publication enjoyed by many thousands of dancers and callers, and it is a good publication. He's a trainer of callers and averages one clinic per month for meetings with caller groups throughout the USA and Canada. He conducts clinics and colleges for the new callers. He's had several books published, and he's been president of the Cleveland Callers Association, officer in 3 other associations, and he's helped 2 groups to be organized. He's also a member of, he's a secretary, executive secretary of Legacy, which is a real honor. And we're so happy to have Stan here as our first speaker, and then we'll introduce the next one.
Thank you, Osa. I'm excited about this subject today. This is one that I have a special interest in, and as I've traveled around, I've made an attempt to ask various callers groups and other groups what are the best methods that they've found to promote classes and to promote square dancing in general. And I've made a list, and today this is going to sound a little bit like a laundry list, I think. But the way I've titled this is 50 Ways to Promote Your Class. Now, as we go through these, we're going to just take each one quickly, and I'll spend perhaps 5 seconds, 10 seconds with a brief description of each, and then we'll reserve fuller discussion of any one of them until discussion time with everybody, because some may want to probe a little deeper and say, well, just what else do you know about that, or how does that work, and so forth. So today it'll just be listing these things, and among these things, certainly, if you think of this as 50 ways to promote square dancing in your class, certainly there are some in here that you haven't tried before. Each one of these, except a few right at the end, which are kind of dreams, has worked for somebody and has worked well for someone. So we hope that some of these will work for you. Before I do that, before I go into the 50 ways, I'd like to give you just a few general principles that are used by admin and people in merchandising and so forth to sell. And maybe we need to study a little more ways to sell that others are using in the commercial business field and apply this to the square dance field. So here are some of the general concepts. In this book, this one entitled Show and Sell Square Dancing. Now, I won't tell you where you can get this because we're not supposed to give any plugs. But in this book, there's a guy named Marion Burton, who is an ad man, has been an ad man for 20 years or so, and he says something that's rather startling. He says that half the advertising in this country is useless and ineffective. Another fourth of the ads that are used through any media are barely adequate, and only 25% is productive. When you think about this, it's really quite startling. And applied to square dancing, maybe it causes us to take a second look at what we're doing and why. He further says to us that when we advertise anything, whether it's square dancing or anything at all, there are certain guidelines that we need to follow. The first is that it must be absolutely honest. The second one is it must be informative. The third one is it must be tasteful. And the fourth, it must be interesting. He further mentions the fact that it needs to appeal to you the listener, or you the reader, directly rather than to a group of people. This might help us in our general concepts about square dance promotion. Good ad men and good merchandisers have given us the further concept of target promotion. And maybe we don't apply this principle as much as we ought to. This means that you should zero in on the type of person that you want to reach, rather than scattering your advertising. First, analyze your market, then develop your package, then choose your best media. And that's plural. Don't just stick to one media. For instance, the women's page of the daily paper is an ideal spot, as many of you know, for an attractive photo and a feature story on square dancing. Morning coffee time, about 9:30 or 10, is a good time to promote on the radio. Why? If it is true that most wives are more apt to convince their husbands to sign up for that class, and you know this happens, then let's go after the wives, perhaps a little more than we usually do, through this target promotion idea. If the average age of most square dancers is the 40s and 50s, what does that tell us about our advertising? Maybe we ought to go a little stronger towards that age group than we're doing, instead of scattering our ads. Are ethnic groups a factor? Which ones? Maybe we should go after them. Non-drinking groups? Which ones? What about church-oriented groups? We know from one-night stand work that sometimes the best prospects, when we do a one-night stand and then promote for a class, are church couples clubs. Think about that if you haven't thought about it before. Applying that principle of a selected group. You must study all the media options available to you and narrow down the list. Then you must get intimately acquainted with the process and particular requirements of the various media. For instance, can you write an appealing radio message? Could you do that right now if you were to sit down and do it? A different format is required for radio than newspaper. Entirely different type of writing. A lot of people just simply write one blurb and they present it to both newspaper and radio. Folks, this is not the way you should do it. It takes selective study to learn how to handle this sort of thing? Are you acquainted with the revolution that has happened within the print media? Now that we have computerized word processors coupled with offset printing, instead of the old-fashioned linotype machines, lead type, and letterpress printing. Some people are still living 20 years ago. Find out more about these methods. The old rule of the 5 W's is still as extremely important in writing any news story as it always was. What, who, when, where, and why. Make sure that these points are in every article that you write. Sometimes we add an H, which is how. The rule in business of not necessarily what you know, but who you know, is vitally important in the publicist game here in this field. One of the most successful classes that I know about was kicked off when couples representing the key businesses and professions in that town, a banker, a lawyer, a doctor, a minister, and several insurance people and real estate people, and company execs all decided to take that class at the same time. They encouraged their fellow employees, and it was a whopping big class. Square dancing sometimes need a little of this local status as the thing to do. Oftentimes we neglect that, and if we sometimes would think about, well, let me give you an example. In Burlington, Iowa, I believe it was, I got this story, that at least 3 sets of employees turned out for that first class that first night. And this was because the boss turned out, and the boss encouraged them. And can't you just hear that boss saying to his associates, gang, it's your time, but I'll be awfully pleased if you and your husband's wives or girlfriends come out to that square dance class with me next week. All right? Let that work for you, because it did in Burlington and it has in many other areas where they've done it. Get the key person that you want, and the rest will follow along. Above all, start early, such as this summer, if not sooner, and involve the 3 C's to get the ball rolling. You know what the 3 C's are? Get a chairman, get a committee, and get a campaign. Oftentimes we neglect this, folks, and we simply follow the same old tradition that we've done every year. Say, we worked last year, we'll work it again. And then we fall flat on our face. Make sure you do this. The 3 C's, chairman, committee, and campaign. Don't leave anything to chance. Have several meetings, you as the caller, along with this committee, because you as the caller, and I should say 4 C's, really, because you're an important ingredient in this. You're the continuity agent that should follow through with all of these club enterprises. Now, you'll do some brainstorming in this group. Don't let anyone say it won't work because we tried it last year. Just eliminate that from the vocabulary altogether if you can do it. Establish priorities, and then get your time schedule, and then go. Let's move into this laundry list here right quick, because to cover 50 is going to take some time, and so I'm sorry this might be a little hard on taking notes, but you can get this on tape. So if you want to further some of these things, we'll also discuss them in the discussion period. These are not in any order as to priority or what works for some much better than other things. They're simply just scattered. You'll find that some of the ones towards the front perhaps are better than the ones towards the end. First of all, demonstrations, demos, public performances, shows, street dances in covered malls. Now that we have so many covered malls in so many communities, let's not neglect this. Putting on a show, and then, of course, in shopping centers generally, in downtown streets, merchant-sponsored special days. Always watch the paper for these kind of things coming up. At large flea markets, I've seen that happen, too, where people gather. Any of these things, outings, fairs, etc., etc. We could go on and on. But you always should have some of your key people in the crowd talking to others and handing out that interpretive flyer or that magic ticket, that free ticket to that big event that you've got, that free introductory program. There are all kinds of interpretive folders. You can research these from any of the publications. Many of them have them, and develop your own. But always have a stack of these ready to hand out, ready to have your friends that are promoting hand out, especially at these open mall programs. Don't plan to get people up in a big public affair and say, now let's get the crowd out. Dancers, go out and pick somebody and bring them up. This usually works. This is counterproductive generally. Now, with a closed group, with a one-night stand that you're doing, with some kind of a fraternity lodge and so forth, this works real good. But in the general open arena of public demonstrations, I'd be very careful about bringing people up. I've seen this work to the detriment of square dancing rather than for the promotion value. Number 2 is a phone campaign in Kingsville, Texas. I picked this up, and it's done in many, many other places. You get a key person to call all the names of the prospects that are given to her, and I say her because, let's face it, the gals are real good on the phone, and this is the kind of person it takes. Call every club member is helping on this, and they're furnishing names of prospects to this key person. The key person phones all of these people before that opening night. And then, if they don't show up, the day after, they get another phone call. Something like this. Hey, we missed you, you know. I called you earlier and you said you thought you could come. We missed you. Well, we couldn't do that. We couldn't get there and this and that. And they'll make excuses. Well, there's still a chance. Next Tuesday night, plan to come. We'd love to have you. And this kind of talk, and by golly, the thing works. And in Kingsville, they increased their attendance 4 squares just with this method, and they've been doing it ever since. And in many other areas, I know in Alabama and some of the other places I've visited, they're doing this same thing, and it works. A letter campaign, perhaps not quite so good, but maybe letters, a nicely written letter, or a special engraved invitation sent to these same key people, and then a follow-up later. Fancy free ticket handout. I got this in Bismarck, North Dakota, and a guy named John Craven, a caller. I don't think he's here, but a great guy, and he happens to be a downtown pharmacist, an important guy right down in the downtown heart of Bismarck. Every summer he hands out these coupons, these tickets, free ticket. Come, and you know that ticket is so elaborate that nobody that he hands it to wants to drop it in the trash can. It's beautiful. It's got several colors. Maybe it's embossed, and it's written sideways and upside down with all kinds of numbers around the edges, like an opera ticket, you see. And so that gets home, and that's the whole point. That gets home, it's given to the spouse, whether it's the gal that picks it up or the guy. It gets to the other partner, and it's read and talked about. And that's how he gets 10 squares most every season, every fall. And that's nothing to sneeze at. Interpretive piece we talked about. Certainly you should develop that and have it ready. Placemats in local restaurants. If you don't know this, Legacy Organization has a beautiful placemat that's available for a very nominal charge. If you want to write, and this isn't a commercial because Legacy is a nonprofit organization, the same as CALLERLAB, and these are done at cost, and you can write to Jim White, just promenader shoes, and you gals, a lot of you wear promenaders, and that's not a plug, but just write to Jim White in Winder, Georgia. You don't have to know the zip because it's such a small town. Okay? And ask about those placemats. Other organizations, let's say a festival and so forth, have used placemats very effectively too. Advertising upcoming events. The idea is that these placemats are on the tables of all these restaurants, and you know how people walk in a restaurant and they sit for a while before they get served. They read anything that's in front of them, folks. It's a dandy idea, and it's a fairly new idea. If you haven't used it, try it out. Now, personal contacts with doctors and dentists, and then leaving the folders in their offices. As people sit, instead of reading a magazine, they'll pick up that folder and perhaps take it home. And, you know, a while back, Holiday Inn urged square dancers to leave these kind of folders in their literature racks. And other motels, too, make good sources for this. flyers at supermarket checkout counters. And by the way, at these supermarkets, many of them have a community bulletin board where you should put up your notice of that coming up class. And make use of these community bulletin boards. They're all over. Sometimes they're in downtown buildings sponsored by the city. And, of course, we needn't mention this because probably all of you have done this, but the Chamber of Commerce is a wonderful source. You should do several things as far as the Chamber is concerned. First of all, most Chamber of Commerce groups have a directory of clubs and organizations. Make sure that your organization gets into that. And, of course, the contact is made there. Then they have an informational source quite often. Make sure that the person that answers the phone and has questions to answer about square dancing has the right information. Billboards. Oh, I want to mention billboards, especially since we're in Reno. There is right now, I'm sorry to say that the billboard had to be taken down, but at the outskirts of Reno, how many have seen this billboard? It's not it's not available right now to see, but it is being refurbished and will be up very shortly. They were unhappy that it couldn't be up for you folks to see it. But right there in great glowing letters as wide as that wall, you'll see Learn to Square Dance programs and so forth. Now, this is a big undertaking, but other towns have done it. And if you can't get a billboard, by all means, get one of those little road signs at the edge of town saying this is a square dance community or whatever. Show a nice little picture of a square dancer, and it'll work for you. It really will. Okay, airport posters. Now, this is more of a dream, but wouldn't it be nice if you'd go through, and I go through a lot of airports, some of you do too, and you see these mammoth up and down vertical posters in full color, advertising various things, car companies and so forth. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you saw one as you walked in up the ramp down the towards the gates that said, Peoria, Illinois is a square dance town, for instance. And there's a lovely picture of square dancers. This is a dream, folks, but after all, these are ideas, and these will work for you, and sometimes you can make an idea work that hasn't been done before. I'd like to see that one done. In New Jersey, there's a place where they brainstormed in their committee, and they said, we've never tried a street sign across Main Street. So they went ahead and did it, and they had a huge banner across Main Street about learning to square dance, and it was during Square Dance Week. And this thing produced more dancers in their class than ever before. Now, you might say, well, posters are cold promotion. They don't do any good. But you never know until you try some of these ideas. And maybe that banner across Main Street, if you can get it worked out, would be just the ticket to help you that much more in your square dance promotion. One gal has a square dance sign in front of her home, and it says this, Learn to Square Dance, Inquire Within. Now, you're going to say, wait a minute, that might cause some problems, right? You know, a lot of strange people knocking on your door. But her point was, there are a lot of people in the community, neighbors and others, that have come to her and asked the question, and especially utility people that come in all the time and, you know, check the meter and so forth, and say, what is this square dance thing? And it works for her. I want to tell you about one group that wines and dines the Welcome Wagon Hostess. Have you ever tried that? How many have ever wined and dined the Welcome? I bet you never did it, did you? All right, here's how it works. You know, these usually pretty hostesses all over the community get from the utility companies, and also Newcomers Club is another very similar organization. And the hostesses go into all these new homes. Now, new homes, new people coming into the area, these are people that aren't so involved in all the bridge clubs and yacht clubs and everything else around the community yet. They're the kind you want. Now, supposing that Welcome Wagon hostess would have a stack of brochures to hand out as she goes into each home, and then says, oh, by the way, have you tried square dancing? Take a look at this. These people are just real friendly in this square dance world. And the way you get the hostess to do that, now you understand this is a little bit against the rules in some cases, because welcome wagon hostesses are supposed to hand out just the commercial brochures that they get from the sponsors. But we know of many cases where you get this gal and her husband, take them out to a square dance, let them see, let them get enthused. And by golly, they'll be the best promotion agents you ever did see. And it really does work. And that's like an extra arm for you, extension of your promotion program, and to the best prospects in the world. Think about it. Now, the mayor proclamation at Square Dance Week is still great. Window displays for Square Dance Week. Guy in Wisconsin makes sure that the Western shop gets involved in this and puts up 2 mannequins, attractive mannequins, a guy and a gal in Western attire, gal in square dance dress, and then all kinds of suggestions about coming to the class and the dates and so forth. And this window display draws a lot of attention. In the newspapers, folks, the dailies want fresh, dated news slanted to future events. Personally deliver these news items to the newsroom. I got more publicity in one local newspaper this way by never mailing the news item. First of all, that news item has to be double-spaced, typewritten, very neat. But never mail it. If you can get away with this and you have access to the newsroom, and you know a lot of small dailies, you can walk right up to the newsroom and go right to that news editor's desk. And lots of times when they open their mail, many items like this go in file 13 real fast. But if you get to know that news editor or the associate news editor and hand them personally a little statement about what's coming up, Square Dance Week and so forth, they'll use it much quicker than they will otherwise. Sometimes they'll ask you a question about it. Sometimes this leads into a feature story, which is what you're really shooting for later on. The weekly papers, a little different slant now. The weekly papers will print more details. They like the human interest aspect. They want names of people in that community. They want photos. And if you present them with a finished 8x10 photo, glossy, black and white, chances are they'll use it. Try it. There are the weekly advertisers, and you're familiar with these, the kind they throw on your front door at home, okay? This is a new phenomenon, folks, that's been just in the last few years. There are many of these weeklies, and they're looking for little news items to fill up those pages to make it more interesting to their readers, besides just the ads all the time. So they will use your stories. How am I doing on time? Okay, 5 minutes. Paid advertising, sometimes not quite as good, but it should be looked at by your committee in case that it might work. As far as the radio is concerned, explore the idea of community service free spots, and you can get them if you concentrate on this aspect and get to the right people at the radio station. Now and then you should buy some spot ads, and that makes them much more warm towards the idea of getting some free community blurbs too. On your spot ad, again, we're not supposed to give any commercials, but if you don't want to work up your own, Sets and Order has a record that has music and then a general statement about square dancing, all developed for you. But you can develop your own. Just take a record, go to the studio, and they'll help you develop this. Play a square dance tune with a caller on it, and then fade this out and come in with your own voice, you as a caller, describing what that program is that you want to promote. And you can use that as a commercial spot. On radio weekly shows, there are many of them, in many places that didn't think they could get a weekly radio show, and they've succeeded. Good example of this is Otto Dunn in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There are public forum programs on the radio that you can sometimes capitalize on. And one gal even calls in on the talk shows. The talk show, folks, on radio is one of the new phenomenons of radio. Some radio stations spend all their time with talk shows. So this gal just rings them up and then talks about square dancing to the guy, the disc jockey, whoever's talking there. I'm going to skip over some of these. Church bulletin boards, church Sunday programs. Sometimes you'll be able to get promotion in those. Area and national magazines, of course, aren't as good for promotion. That's sort of an internal thing rather than external. We're thinking more of external today. TV, cable TV is a golden opportunity. If you can get a weekly series on cable, and there'll be more said about that, I'm sure, as time goes along. And right now there's a video program out of South Carolina that bears watching. I think Ralph Thrift is responsible for that, and it certainly gives us some ideas on how we can get in on either public television with a series like this, which is a little harder, but a little easier, is getting on the local cable TV show in your own community. I could cover a lot of gimmick promotion, things like signs on briefcases and aerial flags and all this, but I think we'll skip over because that's not too productive. Give your club visibility. How many remember down in Miami when Jack Lazary had the previous Trails End Hall, and didn't he not have large bay windows open to the public to watch what was going on? Boy, if you could get this in your area, where you have people actually watching square dancing, and as the club is dancing, it's a good promotional. By sponsoring benefit dances for MD, MS, the blind, cancer, and so forth, and other charities, you can get some good indirect publicity out of this and get good news coverage because they're interested in the fact that you've done this, and then, of course, a statement at the end of the article about the upcoming class. Service club programs, Lions, Rotary, Kiwanis, and so forth are looking for speakers, looking for programs, and so you should capitalize on that. Create a float, get Yellow Page phone contact. This is a dream, but an 800 number, if anybody could, as a group, sponsor the cost of this, certainly it's a great opportunity for people to call in from a great distance with no cost. One-night stands we've talked about. The library is a neglected resource. Go to the library. Make sure that they know the facts on your upcoming class. Start a recycle class. I'd love to spend some time on what Memphis, Tennessee did to get everybody that had dropped out back in, 10 sets of them, back in classes, and in 10 lessons had them ready to go and out into the clubs again. A great idea for promotion, even though you might think that some of these people are gone forever. They're out there. Okay, leave your class open 3 nights. Remember that beginners beget beginners. The end of that first night, did you have a good time, folks? Come on out next week and bring somebody, and you know this works. Try a joint sponsorship of the class. YM, YW, Community Adult Series programs. Sometimes they'll give you not only the hall, but terrific promotion in various local media to get your class going. Larger companies will promote, especially if you get notices in their in-house organ, they call them, or in-house publications, mentioning names of square dancers that work for that company and urge people to attend from that company, and it'll work. I'm going to stop there. We've only got 2 or 3 more, and they're not too productive. We've covered perhaps about 45 ideas. We hope they've been helpful to you, and we'll be glad to talk a little more personally about each one, Osa, if they request. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. You're the type of student that teachers love to have. You prepare well. Isn't that right? He knows his business. Okay. We have our next man that's coming up is Chuck Goodman. I'm sorry. I know a Chuck Gordon, too. Chuck Goodman. And he has been calling for a long time and records on Bogan Records. And he organized the first Callers Association in the New Orleans area in 1961. And he was also a coordinator on TV programs and the square dance time, and that's one of the things I want him to talk about, because now that we have access more frequently to doing TV programs, please take close note of this, because there is a visual program that people look at, and you're selling them by they're watching you, and it can either go for you or against you. And Chuck started the Bar None Satellite Square Dance Club 19 years ago. He had 30 squares. This impressed me, Chuck. And they're up to 85 squares, which makes it the largest club in the world. Their turnover is so large, so small. Their turnover is so small that they can't sponsor, really, a class this year because they don't have room. How many callers dream of that type of thing? And we certainly are happy to have you as one of our program chairmen here, and we hope that you will give us some idea about television.
I have some notes here, and I want to streamline it so you wouldn't mind if I read some of it. Incidentally, we have 90 squares. She was off 5 squares. And we were having 2 classes a year, and then we went to 1 class a year, and we've got to skip the next year because we can't take it anymore. Our turnover is always less than 10%. At 1 year, by going from 1 year from going to from 24 to 42 lessons, we had a 1% turnover, because we found when they stayed in for that length of time that they stayed with you. Before that, it was 20 to 25% turnover. Now, our biggest turnover, as I said, was up to 10%. And I have some notes here. Before starting, I would like to say that it is important for your club to have a good reputation. Right now, I could put 10 or 15 squares in a class if I had room for them. That's because our club has a good reputation. If your people are friendly, if your level is good, and this will all help you. And also, of course, you need a good hall. If you can get a hall a little better than the other fella has, you've got something going for you. Now, in our club, we have, in order to get in, you must be sponsored by one of our members. And by having a sponsor, if in your class they're not doing well, we get a hold of their sponsor, and we tell them that your couple that you sponsored aren't keeping up with the rest of the people, and we'll have to drop them if they don't keep up. They'll get 3 couples, and they'll work with these people. And you'd be surprised how that helps them. And this all stops you from getting dropouts. Now, one thing, can I tell them about our system we use for teaching? It's before. It's all right. We have a different system than anyone in the United States. We teach 42 lessons in 26 weeks. And what we do, we have 2 different teachers. One teacher I have gives them the first 8 lessons. The next gives them the next 8. But after the 10th lesson, I take them on Monday nights. So we dance them twice a week, Monday and Friday. So we put in 16 Monday nights and 26 Friday nights. And you'd be surprised you can get through all the +1 and +2 by dancing them twice a week. And we found by doing that, as I said, our membership has stayed at a high level. Now, another thing we do, before we start our class, we tell our people about bringing out any square dance clothes they may have so we can give them to our class free. In this last class that just graduated 2 weeks ago, when they started in August, or September rather, they brought over 100 dresses out, which we gave to our dancers when they started the class. This gets them in the habit of wearing square dance apparel. Now, of course, Stan has told you about the different places that you can get people interest in square dancing, and I find a mall is very good. By getting to dance at the mall, we were fortunate that the mall advertised in our paper. They had a square dance figure in the amusement section telling what time the dance would go on and so forth. And a good thing to do is to contact the manager of a mall. And right now, business is off for most of them, and boy, they'll look forward to having somebody in there to dance for them. Also, apartment complexes are good. You get a free hall there. Senior citizens complexes, you can go in there. Now, we had racetrack. They contacted me and asked me, a week before the track opens up, they have open house. And they asked me if I would bring a few squares out there, and we performed for them, and they all enjoyed it. They had a big crowd out there. And in fact, one of the clubs, one of the racetracks, Jefferson Downs, they were so impressed that they had me bring 3 squares out from our club, and they called it Barn on Satellite Night with the Chuck Goodman handicap. And we got good response from them. So that's another place that you can get to expose your dancers, is at the racetrack. Tell them open house, and they'll be glad to have you because they want to advertise their track. Now, about the TV I'll make this short and sweet. On the TV programs, in order to put a TV program together, the first thing, it is good to have a connection at one of the advertising agencies because they work with the TV stations. We were fortunate to be on TV for a year and a half, Saturday nights, prime time from 9 to 9:30 with 2 sponsors. And what we did, we invited the presidents of the New Orleans organizations. We had them at our house, and we had them put their club names in a hat. And as they picked their names out, we put a number on them, and that is the way we selected them to be on the television program. And we had them use the caller of their choice, so there was no politics in the thing. And what we would do, I would work the program out with the president of the club about a week before. It was a half-an-hour program. And after we went over the program he was going to use, then I got together with the director of the station. And then about an hour before they were to go on the air, we'd meet with them, and we'd go over the thing and kind of get it down to where it would just fit in with the commercials and so forth and so on. And this went on for a year and a half, and what we did, about one program we had for sub-teens, teens, and golden agers. And what we did, one of the golden agers was funny. After we rehearsed with him and everything was fine, he came up to me, he said, Mr. Goodman, if I can't be in everything, I don't go on. He wanted to be in the dance with the kids. He wanted to be in the other one. But anyway, we had this. And what we would do about every 6 weeks, I would tell the dancers that are listening to us on TV to get their friends over that don't square dance, and we would give them a lesson on TV. And you'd be surprised the inquiries we got at the station because of this. Now, at the end of the programs, the station would supply us with coffee and snacks and so forth. And they were really happy, and we had a wonderful time. We had a wonderful program. And as I said, with space sponsors for a year and a half. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. We're going to take a little time for question and answers, but just to go on just a little bit to go in a little bit more in depth about advertising square dancing where people can see it. I thought maybe I would take a little more on that part of it. And I have found that when I do demonstrate in the malls, I'm very careful, even though we invite our club members, anyone that wants to come and be a part of that. I try to personally see that there are some young people, teenagers, there are some 30 to 40 age, there are some 50 to 60, and I have lots of 65 age and up that are willing to do that. You really need to have a variety of ages, because that shows the public that it isn't just, how many of you have ever heard, oh, I'm too old to dance, or I'm too young to dance, or that's not for us kids, you know, it's old hat. So it shows all ages that they can be a part of this square dance program. Well, maybe college age would be performing. But then when you go to the senior citizen program, take all senior citizens to perform. Then the older people say, hey, I'm not too old. This is something I can do. Another thing that when you're advertising square dancing, trying to get people interested in that, there's a place where you can say, doctors have recommended square dancing for health. We have left, that was one of the big things that I put on my flyer this year. When I advertised our new beginner class in the mall, I said dance for fun, for friendship, and for health's sake. And that's a good slogan. And you can back it up because it is documented in doctors' magazines. In fact, I was very happy to read one in our doctor's office, an article suggesting that square dancing was one of the best things besides swimming there is for health. It exercises not only your body but your mind. So that's a really great way to get people interested. One of the things that I would like to emphasize, and I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes when I do this, but we have a slogan from a long time ago that we've taken square dancing out of the barn and put it in the ballroom. In other words, don't project that hillbilly type of thing when you're presenting square dancing. Emphasize to your dancers, you want them to look beautiful in their square dance clothes. Wear their prettiest costumes. Gentlemen, wear long-sleeved, preferably Western shirts if they will, when you're showing. And have them look beautiful. That's important because that's impressive to people. Because I've heard comments on this. One of the things that we have to be very careful is to warn people not to hip and hop and skip and jump and kick when they're performing. Try to make it look as easy as possible when you're publicizing your square dancing. You say it on your ads, square dancing is easy. Everybody can learn. Did you ever watch some of the TV programs they put on with the cloggers that kick and throw over your shoulder and do a lot of those things? Well, people will back off if you show that to them when you're trying to entice them. That's for show. That's for a show program, but not to entice people to learn how to square dance. I think that when you put your ads out on your flyers, you should have when the class starts, where, the time, the fee charged for the lesson, the name of the instructor, which is the most important thing to you, is not to the public right now. It is after they begin to dance and they start telling their friends about it. But you want to put where, when, the time, directions, and everything. That's most important. So remember, when you're advertising any place in public, stand tall, dress partyish, no gum chewing, and smile and smile and smile, and use standard basics to show it. Okay? We're going to ask that you share with us something that you might have had that worked beautifully for you that we may not have touched on at all. If you do, would you give me your name, where you're from, so that I can give it to the tape.
Carl Beck from Denver, Colorado.
Carl Beck from Denver, Colorado is speaking.
And I was surprised not to hear something that I've used for about 3 or 4 years now.
Carl, would you come and speak in the mic, please?
I'll just stand down here if I don't break it. For about 3 or 4 years, I've been using an idea in the Denver area. I have a little club. One of my clubs is up in the mountains. And we had one of these committee meetings. And Reno really points this out because people are basically gamblers. So we had one of the people in the club that has a printing outfit. And they printed up raffle tickets. We sold raffle tickets for a free set of square dance lessons. And we divide our lessons into 3 groups of 10. And so 10 lessons for free was the handout. Now, people that don't know anything about square dancing, gee, they're going to win something for 50 cents. And you'd be surprised how many people will buy them. For the past 3 or 4 years, my classes in Aspen Park, Colorado, have been increased by about 25% strictly from selling raffle tickets, of which the raffle tickets paid for the free lessons that you gave away.
That's a terrific idea. Thank you for sharing. There's a gentleman way in the back. Would you come up, state your name, where you're from, and give us your idea?
Yes, I'm Paul Tannehill from Dallas, Texas. Am I talking into it now? And I teach lessons for 3 clubs in the Dallas area. And in the past, we've used a number of means, including community service spots on the radio, advertisement in the newspaper, and printed up handbills, which are placed in prominent places in the community. And I try to take a survey after the 3rd lesson to find out how people found out about the lessons. And surprisingly, all of these added promotional efforts contribute a minute part to bringing people into our lessons. I have found that personal contact is usually responsible for about 90 to 95% of the people that come to our lessons. I agree that there is a need for some kind of integrated promotion for square dance lessons, but if you take away the personal contact aspect from your club members, then you can have a disaster for lessons, no matter how much promotion you put into it. That's all I wanted to say.
We have a gentleman right here, black. Would you come up and...
It's something that I have recently developed called a midnight rodeo. The people that you're trying to attract are not the people from across town because they are in another square dance caller's district. Therefore, if you advertise too broadly, you're suffering in your own area and you're not picking up the percentage of people you're looking for. So therefore, the group that I am working with now in the Valley, this last year I suggested it, and it worked beautifully. Go out at midnight and put the flyers on the cars that are in the area that you are targeting, simply because those cars are parked there for the rest of the night. And those cars that are there for the rest of the night are normally the cars that live in the area. These people will get up in the morning, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and see this and say, You can advertise that, in fact, that it is in the local area. We picked up 15 squares. Enough said.
Thank you, Ron. There was a lady right back here. Pat, would you like to?
I'm tall enough. I'm Pat Canay from Lakeside, California, San Diego Association. I came in a little late, so if I'm repeating anything, I'm sorry. These are things that we have done or I've thought of doing since I've been listening today. Number one is calling cards. Instead of making your flyers 8 by 10 size, make them in the size of calling cards. And when you see your friends or have your club members hand them out, people will put these in their wallet. They will put them in there, and they'll be there when they open their wallet and see them, and they'll want to come to the class, hopefully. A lot of people just take flyers, they'll fold them up when they get home, they throw them away. So make them smaller so that they can put them in their purse or in their wallet. Okay, after the people have come to the first or second night, we offer a free dance for the people in our club if they bring another couple. If they bring another couple or two with them, they get in free to the next class lesson. Also, if you have one-nighter callers in your association that don't call for regular groups, if you can print up your brochures or your calling cards and give them to the one-nighters, the one-nighter callers that only do one-nighter callers, they can have these to give out when they go out to these many functions that they go to. Now, a lot of people say one-nighters, you don't pick up very many people, but even if you pick up 2 or 3 people or 10 or 12 people out of all year, that's people that we have missed before. They say, oh, I want to go to a class, but then after that night they forget about it. So if you have some advertisement to give them. Also, if you can print up invitations and have like a beginner class party night right at the beginning of your class. In other words, all of your members of your club, if you present them with invitations that they can make out to and mail to their personal friends. Now, you know that a lot of people get out and they nag people and try to get them there by word of mouth, but sometimes they don't do it. If they receive an invitation, a personal invitation to come, sometimes they'll come forward. Thank you very much, Osa.
Those are excellent. I'm going to adopt your small cards idea, because I think that's an excellent idea. We have a gentleman way in the back. If you plan to speak, would you kind of come up to front so we can save a little time? We have to be finished by 3:05. So we want your input. Don't be bashful, but come toward the front.
Thank you. I'm Torgi Thorbjornsson from Denver. And to add to some of Carl's ideas, I have 2 classes that are sponsored in churches. So your church bulletin is a good place if your church is receptive to putting your ad in the bulletin. Also, the flyer gimmick, put it in the, our members would put flyers on the cars in the church parking lot at the Mass time on Sundays. On the bulletin board flyer, like in the grocery stores, our club put small tear-off tabs that had the phone number and information. They'd put a counted number, 15 or 20 or 10, stapled on there so that people could tear off the tab without ruining the bulletin, take it home with them. You could also count how many people did actually respond to your ad. This has worked very well. In Denver, we have a Yellow Pages listing in the phone book. This is half paid by the Caller Association, half by the Denver Area Square Dance Council, the club's organization. About $160 a year a piece, $320 roughly. We get, I would say, on the average of from 80 to 120 calls per month on this phone. So it's well worthwhile. There's many requests. On our first night of class, when we have people sign up with their name and phone number and so forth, we ask where they found out about it. Our percentage has been about 50% from personal contact. Others was from the church flyers, the bulletin board, etc. The other thing that we tried, and with limited success, but I believe it was untimely, was ads in the RTD bus of Denver. We had about 900 of these long inserts that are put inside the bus in the slots. We had contacts, of course, because we had bus drivers that are in the Callers Association. They had the contacts to get into the terminals to install these. And then Jim Barr, who many of you know is in the round dance activity, was the painter. He painted them all for free. So we had some good help there. Even at that, it was $600 for the material. We didn't get them in until October and November, so that was too late, basically, to cover a beginner's class. That should be very timely. If you spend that kind of money, it should be, June and July or August. And they will leave them in there indefinitely unless somebody else buys the space, then they finally come out. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another gentleman coming forward.
Thank you. I'm Jerry Murray, chairman of the Rural Area Association, Considerations Committee. Some interesting comments, indeed. I've got a couple of things that we've done that I thought I might share with you. One of them is has to do with these weekly shoppers, I guess we call it in our area. It comes out every Wednesday. And I did something a few years ago. I put an ad in there in the want ad section. You know, the little ones if you got a car to sell, or you want somebody's cat or you to give away or that kind of thing. I put a little ad in there and I said, wanted, I wanted people to enjoy the activity of modern square dancing. Simple, 15 words. Cost me $3-4. I got 6 couples the first year. And I've had success with it after that because I put it in our company paper and I put it in the clinic paper and several other things. And it's cheap and it does get to the right people. So you might think about that. Wanted, I put wanted couples because we try to attract that audience. The other thing we've done along that line, people have already mentioned it, and that has to do with personal contact. I believe strongly that you've got to sell your own people, your own square dance people in your clubs, the idea that they are the keys. Sell new dancers to them, and they'll sell it to their people, but you've got to sell them on the idea. And during one of the summer dances, we have a parade, come through like at one of the conventions. The people that are putting on next year's convention, what do? They get bells and whistles and come marching through. You've seen these happen. We do that kind of thing at one dance. Not a lot of people, 8-10 people, but they have wash tubs and horns and duck calls and whatever they can think of, signs that they make up, just to get people's attention. And they, right in the middle of my tip, they break the whole dance up. Now this may, callers, this is in your favor, so don't be offended, so you got to go. That's why you have to be involved, like Stan was saying. But it works. It gets people's attention. And to go along with that, the committee brings telephone books. We have a stack of telephone books that high that night, and cards for them to fill out. All right, we're going to sit down right now. The tip is done then, man. We sit down and we take about 10 minutes. Every name they can think of. If they don't know the address, they got the phone book there, and we get all the names, and then we follow up with the calling and so on, like was suggested earlier. It works. It's worked for us tremendously. The other thing is that's worked. It has been working the last few years for us because of some trial and error, and this is the reason I want to share it with you. Is that of a contest? Again, personal contact is to me the most important thing. It's free. But we create a little contest amongst our dancers. But to do this, gang, if you go with a contest, make it a prize worthwhile. A dinner out with a caller, or something like this. And incidentally, that's exactly what we do. My wife and I feel I take the money out of my own pocket. It costs me $50 now. It's worth it, worth every dime, because the way I set up with my beginners, I get what comes in anyway. So, hey, I'm going to take advantage of it. It works, but you have to keep track. Your TA or somebody has to keep track of who brought those people, and we put another stipulation out in the last couple of years. They have to stick at least 3 times. Otherwise, you get the arm twister. Hey, come, I'll win the contest, and you don't ever have to come again. And believe me, people won't come again if they know they don't have to. So, put a little stipulation on. I'm taking enough of your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a good idea. Okay, Noreen?
I'm Noreen Garlow from Rialto. I'm a caller's partner. The business about putting advertising in a supermarket is very good if the supermarket is permitted to do this. If they don't have a bulletin board, sometimes they'll let you put it on the window. But the idea that our group had this year is to put 2 couples dressed in square dance attire in front of the market on a busy Saturday afternoon and promote square dancing, and as Osa suggested, a younger couple and a very older couple, so that you have quite an age spread there. And the other thing that they want is to put the advertising on a bus stop bench. when he said put it in the bus, on the bus stop bench. That way you get the very local people that are in that area. Thank you.
Next caller from British Columbia.
Thanks very much, Osa. Brian Murdoch, Vancouver, BC. 2 or 3 thoughts. Our club over the last few years has started off the season with a Bring a Friend night. We have asked all our club members to get involved, to go out, find your friends, relatives, or whoever, come and have a night on us. Bring your friends, your contacts out to see what square dancing is all about. We've found a great deal of success from that. In our area, we have had, over the last few years, what we call a square dance caravan. The Vancouver and district area is a fairly large district. We have got all the clubs and callers together on a specific day, generally the second Sunday in the month of September, and ask them on a very organized schedule to participate in their communities. And we start off at roughly 9 o'clock in the morning. Further out in the area, we have a pancake breakfast. This area that I'm speaking of is divided by a large river, so we have groups starting on one side, groups starting on the other, coming from all sorts of different areas, and eventually getting together at roughly 4 o'clock on the Sunday afternoon after having several dances in community centers, shopping malls, and what have you, for one common large dance, getting all our people off to a good send-off in the fall, as well as showing our community what square dancing is all about. And we have one group at the end of the route who will have the sponsorship of a great big salmon barbecue dinner, of which we all contribute, and extra monies go back into our Dancer and Callers Association for future promotions. In our area, we also have a promotion committee who supplies our square dance clubs with 3x5, 8x10, or 8x11 type posters. We have Learn to Square Dance information, borrowing some of the material from our friends from Washington State, and listing all the caller couples in the area by community so that there are contact numbers, and we make these available for people to hand out at their various communities, and these are all offered to our clubs and to our Callers Association as well. We also, let's see what else we've got here. We tried something ourselves last year. We have a young fella, or had a young fella in Canada. Some of you have heard and read about a young man by the name of Terry Fox, who attempted to cross Canada on his artificial leg and one good leg for sheer determination for himself. He lost a leg, a victim of cancer. Unfortunately, we lost Terry Fox about 1.5 years ago. He is a very renowned individual. We think a great deal in memory of him, and Canadians were able to contribute $24 million to the Canadian Cancer Fund in his memory with a wide variety of events. Last year, in our Learn to Square Dance visual display at the beginning of September, we went down to an area that was highly visible. Across our inlet, we have what we call a C-bus, terminals at either end. We put on a square dance display. The patrons that were going to use this service across the inlet, we had a great big bucket out there that said, Square Dancing for Terry Fox, proceeds going to the Canadian Cancer Society. We were there for 1.5 hours, Osa. We raised $200. We made ourselves very visual. We had a lot of handouts of where square dancing was taking place. And with it, we were able to get the newspaper coverage thereafter, showing our community what we had done, how much we had contributed, and who we were. We hope that this theme of square dancing for a personality such as a young visual man like Terry Fox, I believe this is the theme that Canadians are going to use for this coming fall season. It might be something that we all think about raising and making contributions as nations to a certain fund to help others, at the same time giving ourselves in this recreation high visibility. Thanks very much for your time.
Gloria.
Thank you, Osa. Gloria Roth from Nova Scotia part of the time and from Pennsylvania the rest of the time. 2 things. when Chuck got up here and was doing his presentation, I didn't hear the first part of it, and I don't know whether the people, are they aware that Chuck has the largest square dance activity in the world? All right, that's good. One of the things that has come up again, and I heard part of Stan's, and he said it, and many of the ones that have come up here have said it, and Osa said it, and we all know it, is that word of mouth is very important. I have found that through Chet Smith, who some of you perhaps, if you were in the New England area in the early years, knew, because Chet had the largest activity in the New England area before he died, and Chet gave me information that I have used ever since, and when I stopped using it for a period of time when I was moving from one country to another, now, I start classes at any time of the year. I do not start in September ever, because as being a mother of 5 children, September has always been a time of year when I find it very difficult to get things going. And I know if this is true for me, it's true for everyone. You have school supplies and all kinds of things to get, for children. So September is not the best month, even though it's our National Learn to Square Dance Week. Women are very busy with their children. If they're in the age bracket we'd like to see more come in from. So by overlapping classes, you are using the source for promotion of the people who only have one night a week to dance, and that's your class people. The people who are in a class haven't yet given up their bridge nights, their Rotary Kiwanis, and their Lions, and their Kinsmen, and their Redmen, and all the other things that they do. They haven't given those up yet. So therefore, they are still only dancing one night a week. But when you start a new class, those class people, hey, they have a second night, which you make clear to them is free. This isn't my idea. It is Chet Smith's. All right, so I'm passing it on to you because it has worked for me. And when Chuck said he slid over it so carefully. Now I've called for Chuck's club. He had, was it 60 squares? Only his club members were allowed to come because there isn't room for any guests when he has a guest caller in, and that's a fact. I mean, this isn't something. He is so easygoing, and you think, I don't know what you think. All I know is I know that what he's doing, and he is the strictest leader I have ever known, and one of his policies is word of mouth. Only his club members can sponsor someone in a class. And did you hear him say he cannot have a class next year because he has too many people in the activity? And his classes aren't little classes like 3 or 4 or 5 squares. They're 20 squares, and he has a list waiting already this year for another. Isn't that right, Chuck? All right. And so, these are facts. So I think your source is your class people. And think about it. If you have that extra night that you could do for 6 weeks, maybe overlap them, they'll come and have a second night and it'll reaffirm the first things, and they feel just great. Try it sometime. You will find it. And the other thing was in the local areas, the very rural areas where you have, I don't know if this is so in the Midwest and the West, but I know in the East, each community has like a Halloween parade, and again, we're after the September date. In Canada, many of the communities have what we call natal days or exhibition days, in which their community celebrates the birthday of that community. And in these communities, they always have a parade. Someone of your dancers or a friend of a dancer of a friend may have a flatbed truck. And it's great fun to get together and decorate that flatbed truck. Hey, we've had some parades in Nova Scotia that they looked as good to our eyes because we did it ourselves as the Rose Bowl float. And our dancers are equipped with flyers. Those that aren't dancing are walking along, and you have sound, and you have a square. A flatbed truck is about 12 feet wide, but you dance a very small square. And the dancers who aren't dancing, who are taking their turn, are walking along, passing out flyers on the route. And people will enjoy this. They have a personal contact, and it's wonderful entertainment for the parade. So those two things are suggestions.
Thank you, Gloria. Next, coming up, and while he's coming up, I would just like to mention that, of course, there are different opinions on the Rose Bowl parade as an advertisement, but remember that goes national, all over the world. And I'd just like to mention that we do have in this room a man who almost gives his life blood for that Rose Bowl parade, his money, his time, all year long. John Fogg, would you stand and let them see you?
We gave one life Saturday. Eben Madeo passed away.
Eben Madeo passed away, co-chairman of the float. Friday? Saturday.
I'll make this short. I'm Jack Light from Seattle, Washington, and I teach 3 classes a year. And our classes all start in the fall in September We're still carrying our classes through at this time. We carry them through until June. And we have had a very successful program for our clubs. Now, we use many different type of programs in our area to get out people. But one thing that we want to remember, that if we get the people out, well, square dancing sells itself. The important thing is to get the people out to the class, and we always start out with a party night, which is entirely free. It has no connection at all with the lessons. It's up to the callers to make this very inviting for the people and keep it simple and have a good time. This is what has been very successful with our groups. We go to new areas where there's new houses, and they put flyers at the doorknobs, because these people have been coming in from other areas. Some of them are square dancers. Some of them have square danced and been away for a while. We get them back in as recycles. And the important thing is to get those people out that first night, because if you make it inviting enough, well, then what we are giving them, it will sell itself. And we find that what we do is use some of our existing members or all of our members from our club to... They have an information on these flyers they send out. If the people want to know more about square dancing, to call these numbers. These people keep a list of this, of the people that call. They take down their name and address, and then they contact them before the party night. And then when the party night is coming up, say 1 or 2 nights before, they say, well, we'll be down to pick you up. And they go down and pick up these people and bring them into the class, into the party night. And we find that we get a good turnout. For years we have had good classes. Also, one of our clubs has their own hall. They have a sign out in front of the hall with a light on it 24 hours a day of square dance promotion. We find that 75% of our people for that class come from that sign. So those are some of the successful things we've had.
You got to bring that down. I'm Marshall Flippo's cousin. I'm way down here. No, Larry Ingber from Phoenix. There's a lot of discussion, and Stan was talking about how advertisement hits and misses, and what's good and what's bad. I've watched many callers in our area do these mall things, and I found that if a caller comes out and just puts on a hash record, people that are not dancers will watch for just a few minutes and walk on. If you use a little psychology and try to plan out what groups you're looking for, what groups you're entertaining at that time, and plan records of the modern tunes that they hear on the radio, these people stand around a lot longer and will pay more attention to what you're doing. Hash calls are very fine for us square dancers. We know what's going on. The non-square dancer just sees some movement, just hears some music, and doesn't associate himself with that music or his favorite record that he might have heard on the radio or she might have heard on the radio. So I think there's a little psychology we have to use on what records to pick when we go out on these demonstrations.
I agree. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's important. Chuck asked me to just remind you that if you contact TV stations, contact the educational stations or independent stations, and they are always looking for something that is colorful and educational to go on the TV programs. We're going to have to kind of sum this up. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your input. I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I got many terrific ideas. I'm very excited about going home and putting some of them in order. If you're like I am, I forget after I'm home some of the real terrific ideas that have been given here today if I didn't write them down. And I would like to suggest this is your program. This is what keeps you in the business. You need to, in your own home area, even if you have a committee that is doing your advertising in your clubs, if you're not the one that does it, follow it up. Get behind them. Call them. Keep pushing them, because they have other things. They're not as involved and interested 9 out of 10 times as we are. And so see that they follow up on these promotions and publicity things. But for us, I truly think that this tape is one of the most valuable tapes you can buy and take home with you. Play it at home. Take off what you want and try. Maybe next year you'll evaluate what you did. If it worked great, do it again. If it didn't, try something else. This tape will never be old. So I'm not trying to promote the tape for CALLERLAB. I think it is a wonderful thing for us to have. And I certainly am going to get one. And if our Callers Association has not secured one, I'm going to take it down there, let them make another tape off from it. This is very good to hand out. And I have a few here, but you can order them. This, Show and Tell. I'm sorry, I won't mention the name on the bottom, but is really excellent to have in your square dance material. But this, every caller that belongs to CALLERLAB should have. How many of you do not have the modern square dance image? You do not have it. Go get it and read it all the way through. It is marvelous. You can go back over and over and find things that are just so helpful. And I hope that you all have gigantic classes this coming season. And thank you for coming.